Hello, Hannah. Thanks for joining the SPRTER Podcast. Let me introduce you to our guests and then we can get straight into it. Um, Hannah began playing basketball after the Olympics in 2012 and where she decided to switch from equestrian to basketball, joined the Sydney Flames in 2013 and was called up to Australian national team in 2015 for the Friendship Games in Osaka, where Australia won bronze. So she was also selected to the under-25 team in 2015 and won a silver medal with them. He currently represents Sydney Olympic Flames and the Wollongong Roller Hawks, and I think you just returned from a pretty big tournament. Is that correct?
Yeah, just got out of hotel quarantine yesterday.
Fantastic. Welcome to the SPRTER Podcast, Hannah.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, as I just introduced us to our guests, my name is Tilo, and we will be talking to all of the to amazing sporters from around the globe and learning from your experiences, learning more about you and seeing what type of wisdom you can share with our followers. And I am sure, having followed your career for a while now and having you on board of the SPRTER app for a while now, it's nice to get to know a little bit more about you as well. So let's dive straight into it. You started with equestrian. Talk me through that and how did you start that career? What made you excited about it, and what made you shift to basketball?
So I grew up on a farm just outside of Sydney. My two older brothers and my mum all horse rode. So I started having pony rides in front of my brothers from about 4 months old. So I grew up in the sport and I loved it from day dot, and it was obviously I was quite sick when I was young. So it was one of the places that my parents found that I sort of perked up and I laughed and I giggled. So it stayed despite the objections of my medical team. I learned to ride before I learned to walk and just went from there basically.
Well, that's funny how I grew up on a farm as well. My mom put me on a horse when I was 3 days old as well. I was like, this is what you're going to do from now onwards every day of your life. It seems like that horse crazy parents, they have a big influence on their kids.
Yep, definitely.
And then, so what made you transition from horseback riding to basketball, and what do you like about the sport, and how did that come about?
It's a bit of a random story. I actually got recruited during London Paralympics via my parents in a casino.
Okay.
So equestrian was one of the last teams to be selected for London, and by the time the team was announced, my parents couldn't get tickets to the opening ceremony. So they decided to watch it on the big screen in the casino over the road. And obviously we're decked out all in Aussie gear. And one of the former Australian coaches for the women's wheelchair basketball team was in the same casino and spotted them obviously decked out in all their Aussie gear and kind of came over and introduced himself. It was like, oh, she should give wheelchair basketball a go if she wants. And came home from the games. I didn't have a horse to ride because I didn't own the horse that I took to London. And suddenly had a lot of spare time on my hands. And decided to give it a go just for a bit of fun and fell in love with it. It's fast paced. It's, adrenaline rush. It's good fun to play. And I'd never played a team sport growing up. So it was a really big shift in that way. And it was, just exciting to kind of be a part of the community.
And that's as you said, it's a random story, but a really good story. And I was like, wait, what? That's how these careers get started. That's phenomenal. And you just mentioned you haven't played a team sport before. So how is it different? Talk me through that difference between equestrian, that's a lot more individual, as in you and the horse, versus a team sport where you have to rely on others as well to do that job.
I think the hardest thing for me transitioning between the two was when I messed up in equestrian, I only screwed myself up. So it wasn't that bad, but when I messed up in basketball, I was screwing over 4 other people's hard work. So that mental shift was really hard to deal with, and to not like get frustrated with myself for that, like for making mistakes and things like that. I think it's a lot nicer in some ways, in the fact that, you know, you do have people to rely on and fall back on when you aren't having a good day. But at the same time, I still struggle a little bit to kind of integrate fully into a team environment, because I'm just so used to getting ready individually and getting ready by myself and being ready as an individual athlete rather than being ready to be in the team.
And like two follow-up questions. This is awesome. So do you feel like because you now, when, as you set up, when I screw up, that impacts others, does that make you work harder?
I think like I'm not someone who doesn't do things full out anyway. Like that's just kind of my default setting, is pedal to the metal and let's go. Okay. But I think it's more like the recovery of like not dwelling on that mistake and just getting back into the game. So like I used to have a really bad habit, if I'd like miss a layup or something, I'd like stop and clap my hands. Which obviously like that's 2 or 3 seconds that I didn't have my hands on my wheels and I wasn't pushing. So kind of training that habit out of myself to then go, all right, screw it, let's go next thing. So I put my frustration into my pushing now, and that's like how I deal with it. So yeah, it's different and difficult, but you kind of get used to it and you train yourself into better ways.
Okay, that's awesome. And then the second follow-up question is, in how much of an influence do your team members have on you pushing? And you already alluded to, it's like, hey, I can't clap my hand, I can't curse, I can't get it. You know, I really gotta go get back to it. So how much of an influence do they have on you to push yourself as well?
Yeah, obviously a heap. Like it is really hard if everyone's like, you know, if we've had a big day or we're really tired, or, you know, especially when you're getting towards the end of tournaments where you've been going for, you may, you know, sometimes 2-3 weeks if you've done back-to-back tournaments and you're kind of a bit over it. So yeah, having that really positive environment with other people there to pick you up is really big. It's really, and you know, it is one of those things where not everyone's going to be on the same level on the same day, and it's everyone's job to pick everyone else up, sort of thing, so that we are all performing at the best that we can.
That makes a lot of sense in terms of trying to pick at each other up and really look into, I guess, smoothing out each other's performance. As you said, no one has a good day. Not everyone has a good day. And if everyone has a good day, it's a really good day. Yeah. So those are the days legends are made. So in terms of a team, obviously you just came back from a pretty big tournament. Talk me through that experience before we get into quarantining.
Yeah, again, it was my second Paralympics, but my first wheelchair basketball. So again, it was a really big shift in environment and mentality, going individual to team sports, that sort of thing. And you kind of are living in each other's pockets for 3 weeks. And just the fact that, like, obviously Tokyo was quite different from any other games because of COVID. So normally, you know, you can go out, you can go see the city, you can go have some downtime. Whereas this time we were just in the village, like you weren't allowed to go anywhere else. And particularly for the Australian team, we had quite strict COVID protocols. So we weren't allowed in the dining hall. We weren't allowed to go to like the shops that are in the village. We weren't allowed to go to any like the leisure centers or game centers or anything like that, because they were trying to limit our exposure to other teams. So it was definitely very insular and very like in a bubble, and you were seeing the same people every day for 3 weeks. And that can definitely get very difficult. Again, it's 3 weeks of seeing the same faces and doing the same thing every day. So it can get a little bit wearing, and definitely by, I think the last few days, we were all kind of looking forward to going home and having sort of 2 weeks where we didn't see anyone. But yeah, like it was an amazing experience regardless. And the fact that they managed to pull it off in a global pandemic is absolutely amazing. It was still, you know, it was still a Paralympic Games, and it was still amazing to go to. Just a very different vibe than what it normally is.
I can imagine, and obviously COVID has really hampered the whole sport world, not just the whole world, but then also particularly the sport world in regards to competition, particular team sports. And you just mentioned that the Australian team went through a few, maybe call it extra steps that other teams didn't go through. Um, would you so you weren't there wasn't any ability it wasn't possible to mingle with some of the other teams or connect at all?
No, so the only time like we really saw other teams was like when we were competing. Other than that, like you could say hello and like obviously we caught up with quite a few of our friends, but it was very much social distancing and all of that sort of stuff where you weren't really allowed. Whereas, yeah, in normal games, you would go hang out in other people's buildings, you would go get coffee, you'd go get food, you'd go just generally chill with other teams because, we compete against these people day in and day out a lot of the time, and we're quite good friends with a lot of them. And especially after not competing for 2 years, we hadn't seen a lot of them for quite some time in person. So it was a little bit sad in that respect that we couldn't go catch up properly, but at the same time, it was just kind of one of the things that you were like, all right, cool, that's how it's going to be done.
Yeah, it's just some of those aspects you just gotta basically go like, yeah, we have to accept it. We're here. We knew about that before, but I I wanted to say I can imagine, but I probably can't. So um, yeah, it's gotta be difficult. So 3 weeks full on every day with the same people. What was your favorite memory from the 3 weeks?
I think there's probably a couple. I think celebrating the opening ceremony in the village was really cool because we did that as a whole Australian Paralympic team. So that was really fun. We did like a pre celebration before we sent our flag bearers off to the actual opening ceremony. So that was really cool. That was really fun. And I think also just like the first time rolling onto the actual competition court, like that's always something that takes your breath away, regardless of what tournament you're at. It's just that kind of moment where you're like, I'm here, I'm ready to go. Like, is that real first like jolt of excitement to be like, this is where we're going to play. Like, so yeah, those are probably the two big ones.
Okay, and I can imagine. I mean that's gotta be just amazing to represent your country, and they're like, hey, this is because Tokyo 2020 happened in 21, right? It's like, oh well, this is a year delayed, so but we finally made it, and I can imagine that that's got to be pretty special to be there and be representing Australia because it's such a proud country.
Yeah, we're very big into our sports.
Very big into sports, very, very loving of the athletes. I lived on the Gold Coast for 5 years, actually, so I am.
It's a nice part of the world.
Oh yes, definitely. Um, while the sports are happening, while we are now based in the US, but I am very fond of Australia and of Australian sport culture. So it's pretty amazing. Now, obviously, the wheelchair basketball Olympics, like the Paralympics, in like this is probably the biggest stage that you can get for the sport, I would assume.
Yeah, definitely.
So, how have you seen participation in wheelchair basketball change, particular from on the women's participation side over the last years?
I think particularly from sort of maybe Beijing onwards, there's been a really big shift in like the level of elite that comes through. Getting better chairs and things like that. Like the equipment's improved so much that it's, state of the art now. And basically like this is a full-time job now. We don't often get paid as a full-time job, but it's a full-time job. We're training 25 to 30 hours a week most of the time, not including travel. And for the girls who are in Europe, a lot of them are playing in the European leagues. So they compete, 5-6 months of the year professionally with the men because it's a combined league over there. It's not separate. Here, we play obviously National League. I play in the WNWBL and the NWBL. So men's and women's, I play in both. So that keeps me pretty busy for 5-6 months of the year as well. So I think that's kind of been a big thing. I think the fact that it is becoming more mainstream and you are seeing a lot more promotion through mainstream media is meaning that a lot more people are coming into sports programs because they realize that they are eligible to be in those sports programs. For example, like I didn't know I was eligible to play wheelchair basketball because when I was recruited, I was still walking full time.
Okay.
But I didn't realize that just because I had my disability, I was eligible to play. I just assumed it was people in wheelchairs that played. And then I was like, that's now that I see it, I'm just like, oh, that was such a stupid assumption to make when quite a few of our players are walkers full time sort of thing. And you have your amputees and things like that. So I think that fact that it is becoming more promoted through national organizations and through rehabs and things like that, you're getting a lot more people. I think particularly with wheelchair basketball, we're getting a lot of ex-able-bodied basketballers come through who have had career-ending injuries in knees, hips, ankles, things like that. Or even quite a few of them have had like spinal degenerations just because they've landed on their backs too many times and things like that. So we're getting a lot of ex-able-bodies coming through as well, which I think is really good.
I mean, you touched on a whole bunch of different aspects. Let me drill down on a few of them because this is fascinating. Recapping what you just said, that you can walk, and that we have what you call able-bodied people and who are not bound to wheelchair, who play, and that seems like one of the big misconceptions that are that is towards the community. What other misconceptions do we need to clear up right now?
I think probably the most important one, and it has been a really big shift in the media in the last couple of years, is focusing more on being an athlete rather than like the disability inspiration stories, which is great, obviously, but like being more focused on the fact that we are athletes and that it's more towards being athletic elite rather than being a disability inspired thing.
I totally understand that. As in, hey, it's like, yeah, we like, and that's what the media often does. It's like portraying all these sobbing stories. You had this big setback in your life, and you had a comeback, and you achieved success, and that's what triggers a lot of emotions. But I understand that, hey, at some point, like, yes, this is nice, and I overcame this, but I'm also a really good athlete. Like, despite all of this, right? It's like I'm training 25 hours a week, as you just said. Like, how many people train 25 hours a week plus the competition? Not many, right? You're at the elite level. So I think that makes a lot of sense in terms of the misconception of saying, hey, well, yes, inspiring stories are great and role model, and I do think that the role model effect is really strong, particularly in this community, in particular as we see more and more that particularly young females, they look up to those who are competing at the highest level. So, and they, for generations, they didn't have those role models, but now they do, and that's really exciting. But I can also see that, hey, this is a story that's like, yeah, we're much more than this. I don't need to be a role model all the time. Like, treat me as someone who's performing at the highest level. So I can absolutely see that. It makes a lot of sense. And I've heard that from a few athletes, particularly in the female sports, because not just in the para community, but in general, in females, like, hey, we're actually really damn good at what we do. This is awesome. Now, big stars we see in like Australia had some big basketball stars in the mainstream audience, in the mainstream NBA. I mean, you see whether it's Ben Simmons, whether it's Liz Cambridge. Like, there's some big stars on the main stage. How much do they influence the sport in your area?
I think like I'm pretty lucky where I am on the Sunshine Coast. It's a very big basketball community anyway, because we've got 4 or 5 basketball clubs running in our area that compete all the way up to state league and national leagues and things like that. So the community that I'm in is a very big basketball community, which obviously is really good. And we do have quite a lot of support from the local clubs as elite athletes. There's only a couple of elite athletes here on the coast with me training out of our uni. And obviously the main hub is in Brisbane. But I think, again, it's kind of one of those things where we are slowly starting to get more recognition from the able-bodieds, and Mariana Tolo has been a massive supporter of us, and she's kind of dragged some of the other able-bodieds in to watch our games and things like that. And they then a lot of the time will come and do come and try days and things like that. So they kind of get an idea of how hard it is to play the game that they love and that they're experts in a wheelchair. It is really fun to try and watch able-bodieds when they are first in a wheelchair, because they still try to use their feet to pivot and turn and things like that. And you're like, no, you don't have those anymore. You've got to use your hands for everything. So yeah, I think that part of them kind of understanding that how hard it is for us to play, it kind of sets them back to their sort of early teen years when they were starting to get more skills and things like that, and they're like, oh, this is really hard, and you're like, yeah, you're gonna find some new muscles in your arms that you didn't know you had.
Yeah.
So I think that part's really good, and the fact that we can get able-bodied people in to play our sport really easily certainly makes it a lot better for them to understand how hard we do work.
That's awesome, and I can't imagine. It's one of the things where, crap, am I starting to learn to walk again now? You just said you're training on the Sunshine Coast, which is interesting. Actually, in 2013, when I was at Griffith, I worked on a big project for Basketball Queensland, where we mapped out all of the facility needs, particularly in regards to basketball and all of the accessibility aspects. And I think they've expanded a lot since. Particularly Sunshine Coast was one of those hotbeds that where basketball was growing, and they really wanted to make sure that the wheelchair community was served, as well as some refugee communities in Brisbane. So it seems like they've actually achieved those goals in supporting and creating multi-purpose facilities there.
Yeah, definitely. We've got three facilities here on the coast that are fully wheelchair accessible, that have all the facilities that we needed. I think particularly where I am at the University of Sunshine Coast, we've been super lucky in the fact that we are actually a para-sport hub. So we have multiple sports running out of our high performance program. So we have wheelchair basketball, we have wheelchair rugby, we have para swimming, we have para triathletes, and we have para cycling, all running out of the uni. So the pool, gym, and courts are all fully set up to be disability friendly, which is really awesome.
That's amazing, and I know the government has invested quite a bit, and the Basketball Queensland has invested quite a bit, and it was about time. So I'm glad that has paid off. So it's nice to see when a project that you've been working on for, I've been working on that for about a year back then with them. So it's nice to see that actually came through.
It definitely did.
Makes an impact. So that's awesome to hear. I do have a question. So we have a segment where we call Break the Rules. Change that would make the sport better, and better is defined as you like to define it. Whatever it is, could be more entertaining, could be better for the athlete, could be better for the fans, could be anything.
I think probably the one that is the most prevalent in wheelchair basketball at the moment, and there was quite a big social media movement around it last year, was the International Paralympic Committee classification manual changed. And because of it, we ended up losing quite a lot of players who were considered non-eligible now, after some of them had been competing for multiple decades at an international level and then were suddenly deemed non-eligible because their disability didn't fit into the 10 categories described by IPC. So that's probably the biggest one for me. We lost 2 of our players in the women's squad which was really heartbreaking because they were both young players that played up to like baby NWBLs and things like that. So WNBLs. And, you know, one of them had a college scholarship to the US and then lost it because she injured her knee so badly that she no longer could run and jump. And then both of them kind of got restarted in wheelchair basketball, represented Australia, and then during a Paralympic year then got told that they were no longer disabled enough to play a disabled sport, even though neither of them can run and jump, neither of them can play any other able-bodied sport. So that's probably the biggest one for breaking the rules. I would love to see that rule change reversed, and to have those people re-included back into our game, because I think it's a massive thing, especially for ex-wheelchair basketball athletes. Like I was saying, like to have them come back into our sport has been great for them, because a lot of them suddenly, you know, their world gets turned upside down and they've been an athlete for so long, and then suddenly they're like, oh, I can't play the sport that I loved and I've played for so long. So that's probably my biggest one, is I would really love to see that rule reversed.
That's tough. It's like, how do you want me to injure myself more? like what is that? Is yeah, I can see that is a very, very important change.
Yeah, because like Canada lost David Eng in their men's team, who I think from memory is a 4-time Paralympian. Like, he'd played for so long and then all of a sudden was told he wasn't eligible. You had George Bates in the UK who uses a wheelchair daily, but because he didn't have the right type of disability, he was excluded. So things like that. It was very frustrating to watch it all go down. And obviously for my team, because we lost those 2 players, it was really heartbreaking and really hard to reset as a team and be like, oh, okay, we're going to, because we qualify, like they came to qualifiers with us, they helped us qualify for Tokyo, and then for them not to be able to actually go to the games was a bit soul destroying, to be honest.
That's very hard. That's heartbreaking in a way, right? And from an athlete perspective, you've been working so hard for like the world stage.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't get bigger than that, and then you're being told, yeah, you can't compete. Not just because you're not good enough, which happens a lot, right?
It definitely happens.
There are other players that are better, but we had this rule change that was made somewhere in an office, probably in Switzerland, and people were like, how is that a thing? That is crazy.
Yeah, it was definitely a hard pill to swallow.
That's difficult. To something a little bit happier. As a team, there's a lot of locker room banter.
We kind of have a bit of a saying that actually popped up at Paralympic qualifiers when we were in Thailand, and it's not bullying, it's banter.
Sounds very Australian to me.
And it actually happened with the 2 girls that were deemed not eligible, and I don't know why, we had plastic balls, like kids' little toy balls, for some reason. We were doing some sort of exercise, and we just ended up having like a full-on like dodgeball fight with them and just pegging them at everyone. And yeah, one of the girls just ended up with like 8 of them and was just like pegging them at this one person. Just like out in the grass, like in the middle of a resort in Thailand, and like obviously all the other people are just walking past like, what on earth is going on? Like, there's wheelchairs everywhere. Like, we were just rolling around on the grass laughing our asses off.
That's awesome.
So that's probably one of my favorite ones. Probably the other one is my teammate stole a mascot costume.
What kind of mascots were we talking about?
I think from memory it was like a cartoon starfish.
Ooh.
And was like running around the stadium in it.
That's amazing. Isn't like, who's that? Oh yeah, that's. Do you remember the name? Can you say the name? Is that public? Can that be public?
I know it was I know it was one of our high pointers, but I honestly can't remember which one.
All right, okay. I was like, yeah, someone's running around in a starfish costume.
Yeah. You're like, I recognize the shorts because they're definitely Australian shorts, but
that also sounds very Australian. That's phenomenal. I will keep the quote, it's not bullying, it's banter. I'll keep that in mind. probably don't want to promote that too much.
No.
But I understand that is definitely help. Oftentimes it's really helping with team culture and a little bit of a us versus them community. So that's awesome. I don't want to take too much of your time, but I do really enjoy this conversation, and I want to thank you for your time, Hannah. This was awesome. This is just getting some insights on the Paralympics, on your experience there. Quarantining, is that something we need to get into?
If you would.
Talk me through it. 2 weeks in the same hotel, you can't leave.
Yep. Not allowed to leave. Anytime you open the door, you have to have masks on. Everything's delivered to your room. Look, we were very lucky in the fact that Paralympics Australia obviously was quite prepared for it, and we had things that we could tune into every day that were different. We had workouts, we had yoga, we had mindfulness, we had a couple of business orientated stuff to do with that. So it wasn't as horrible as I thought it was going to be, but it was something that you had to be prepared for. So we packed quarantine bags that we sent off before we left with some people took games, some people took schoolwork, some people took whatever to keep yourself entertained. Look, it's definitely hard. Probably the first week it was kind of just decompressing away from the Paralympics, which is always a really big come down anyway. It's a really hard thing after because you've worked and you've worked and you've worked, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I have all this free time now. So it's always a very big come down, and I was a little bit better prepared for it this time around. The first time around, it definitely caught me by surprise, and I was like, I don't know what to do with myself. So I think that part and the mental part of that, not having anyone to lean on and not really having a routine that you could get back into as such, was definitely very difficult. Again, we were super lucky in the fact that we have an awesome team psych who checked in with us every couple of days to make sure that we were still doing all right and not climbing the walls or anything like that. But I think it was kind of good at the same time, because it forced you to take 2 weeks of rest, which you kind of needed physically and emotionally and mentally just to chill. But yeah, you do get bored very quickly. But it was just, unfortunately, and I was very jealous watching a lot of the US and European athletes just go straight home and go straight back to life. And I was like,
yep. Australia's taken the quarantining very serious. That's for sure.
Yes. So, and then we weren't sure if we would be allowed home to our state, our home states, without having to quarantine again. So we were potentially looking at 4 weeks of quarantine. But thankfully, no. So I've got another 3 days of semi-stay at home until I get my day 16 COVID test. But after that, I'm free to go. And then the only ones I think that are still a little bit up in the air are the Perth athletes. They've got a lot. WA is very, very strict on their borders, so they have exemptions, but they've got to get home within a certain time frame, and obviously flights to the western part of Australia are quite limited, so they are still doing a little bit of battle, but hopefully they get home safely tomorrow.
Yeah, that's got to be difficult. Now, what are you looking forward to most? You've been out of the country for a while, you've been in quarantining, now you're at home type of quarantining for a few more days. What's the first thing you're going to do once this is over?
I'll be honest, the thing that I was looking forward to the most was just having a really, really hot shower. Because I like my showers 3rd degree burn hot, and the hotel shower was lukewarm at best. So that was number one thing yesterday when I got home, was jumping in a really nice hot shower. Obviously I was super happy to get back to my partner, because I hadn't seen him for 5, nearly 6 weeks, and he'd been a bit unwell before I went away and while I was away. So getting back and seeing him in one piece was nice. Getting back and seeing my dog as well, who's currently sleeping on my lap, was very exciting as well. So just generally being at home and being in your environment was the big thing, to be honest.
I can
Not living
imagine.
out of a suitcase.
Oh yeah. Well, I can imagine the partner and the dog and the family. That those are the things that matter most. But
Yeah.
you kind of mentioned that shower first.
After 12, I had a really long commute yesterday. So we left the hotel at like 6:30 a.m. Our flight got delayed an hour, so I didn't get back to Queensland till well past like 1 o'clock. And then there was 2 car crashes on the highway north. So yeah, I didn't get back to the coast till about 5:30. By the time everything was done, so it was like a 12-hour commute for something that really shouldn't have been that long.
Sure. Yeah.
And yeah, just the general like grossness of traveling and temperature changes and a body that doesn't thermoregulate well. I was really gross, so the shower was definitely #1 priority for everyone's well-being.
That's funny. No, I can imagine. I mean that flight should not, or that travel should not take that long. Um, but it's awesome to hear that you're back with loved ones, and obviously the Sunshine Coast is a phenomenal place to be in, and getting to enjoy some of the weather and some of the beaches as well. That'll be really good change.
Yes.
And call it, as you said, 2 weeks. It's you've been able to recover from that stress, but I find the beach so calming for my mind as well.
Yeah, definitely.
That this is just another level of relaxation. So we wish you all the best with that. We are excited to follow the career as you're back in the leagues down the road, as you are on the court. I also want to make sure that our followers and hear about and learn about your experience store that you have set up in the SPRTER app. So you got an amazing experience, whether it's a virtual stadium visit or question and answers, any sort of those aspects. Head over to the SPRTER app and check it out. Hannah's got some awesome stuff there. So check out her experience. So we're also moving into like signed pictures. I'm pretty keen on a signed memorabilia picture from the Paralympics. So if you add that to your store, I think I'd be keen to get that up and running as well. And make sure to follow Hannah on Instagram at @quaddy_dotty and the SPRTER app. And all the best with the career. We're excited to following along.
Thank you. Yeah, it's going to be a busy sort of 12-18 months with the short cycles. So it's going to be a bit crazy. We don't get a whole lot of time off. We go back to national training camps in December. Qualifiers for Worlds are in March, and then we've got Commonwealth Games and World Championships sort of July to November next year. So definitely will be a busy 12 months.
That's awesome. But I mean, in this case, I guess busy is good, right?
Yeah, I think for me particularly, I'm like a really big procrastinator. So having a lot of stuff on my plate helps me keep organized.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, the Commonwealth Games going to be awesome as well to follow along. And yeah, we're in for the support.
Yeah, I think I'm super excited about that because it's going to be wheelchair basketball's debut. So it'll be fun to be part of the first one if I make it.
Well, we certainly hope so. Well, good luck with that. Stay healthy, happy, and happy recovery.
Thank you very much.
Us on the SPRTER Podcast, and we'll hope to see you soon. Thanks.
Thank you for having me. Bye.